My name is Ralph Richarde. I was born in High Prairie, Alberta, August the 9th, 1936, out in the country at our dad's farm. And Paddle Prairie was started in 1938. And I've got I'll have to read this. It says Paddle Prairie, how Paddle Prairie got its name. Paddle Prairie, according to legends, the Beaver Indians came to the area by canoe and hung their paddles in the trees. When the first settlers arrived, they found the paddles and called the area Paddle Prairie. In 1932, the half-breeds of Alberta formed an association known as l'Association des Métis, Métis Association of Alberta and the Northwest Territories. The Métis people and the government did not want to make the same mistakes that were made with the land scripts. Certificate of the rights to receive payment later in the form of cash or land. The Métis were eager to go on the reserve with treaty Indians or to live like the white people. Since the Métis chose not to do either, Métis colonies were set up through negotiation between the government and the Métis leaders. Some of the leaders were Joseph Dion of Garnerville, Alberta, Malcolm Norris of Edmonton, Felix Callahoo of St. Paul, Jim Brady of St. Paul, and Peter Tompkins of Gruard. These men volunteered their time and traveled many miles on foot and drifted down rivers looking for good land. As a result of these meetings, in 1938, the government of Alberta passed a law known as the Métis Betterment Act. The land at Paddle Prairie was set aside as a colony and permanent land base for the Métis people and could not be sold. And I want to show you the pictures of the great five people. These are the men that organized the Métis settlements in Alberta. And like I said, I was born in High Prairie, and when the settlements were formed in 1938, my dad and his brother, John Felix, they came by, my dad had a Model T Ford. He came up to the third battle just by Manning, and he walked from there to Paddle Prairie, and he picked out his quarter section, and so was my uncle. There was no Mackenzie Highway, and of course high level wasn't formed yet, and there was just a wagon trail from Manning to Keg River Post, and it went right through Paddle Prairie to Fort Vermilion. It was a telegraph line road that was made in 1930-31, and this was the only way to get to Manning by wagon or walking or horseback. Although when we left High Prairie late fall of 38, my dad put us on the freight train from High Prairie to Gruard. From there overland with two wagons. There were 6 of us children born in High Prairie. I was 2 years old then. We got far as Manning, Manning was originally called Battle River Prairie. That was the first name Manning was called until they changed it back to Manning. It was changed back to Manning by Premier Ernest E. Manning. We got far as Manning late October, and it started snowing, so we wintered there. And in the spring of 39, when we came, it took us about a week by wagons, and we finally got to Paddle Prairie. There was one family living here already. It was Murray and John Christian family, and we were the second families to move into Paddle Prairie. And so Keg River Post is 20 miles west of Paddle Prairie, and there was a Hudson Bay store there and a Revlin Ferries Brothers store. So this is how the settlers, when we got here the early spring of 1939, there were 6 other families that moved in. So the people, they got their groceries at Hudson Bay store in Keg River. And finally in 1942, this is when the government moved into Paddle Prairie. The settlers, they got together and built a log store and a log building for the residence of the supervisor. And we started getting our groceries by the either Hudson Bay boat or Jock O'Sullivan Stixon boat that came from Peace River. And well, incidentally, Peter Tompkins is one of these. He's the one that picked out Paddle Prairie. He came down by river, I guess, from Peace River, and he got off the boat. And Tompkins Landing is 15 miles east of here, and this is why it's called Tompkins Landing, because Peter Tompkins is the one that came here and found the Hughes land, and this is Paddle Prairie today. And so there was more families moving in, 39, 40, 42, 43. So there was enough children to go to school. So the settlers got together and they built a log school and a log outhouse and a teacher's residence. That was in 1943. I was 7 years old then when I started school. So, yeah, and then like I say, and after that, up to 1950, there's quite a few other families moving in, and this is what we have today, Paddle Prairie. It probably starts changing back in the 60s. Like there was quite a few families living here since 39. Then like we got our school in 43 and our store in 42. And right up to into 50, there was more families moving in. And well, in the 40s, the government arranged we had a big sawmill here, you know, and the farmers started farming right away. But this was all by horses. And we didn't get no machinery like tractors, etc., until about 1955 is when we had our tractors, and then they gave the horses a rest, and it was all by tractors and thrash machines and etc. But I see it's pretty well the old generations now. For people that moved here, like our dads and our grandfathers, they're all gone. You know, it's we are the elders now. Like I'm 84 years old, and we're the elders, and it's the difference with the younger generation. It's more education-wise now, of course, the schools, and like our school here, when we started school, it only went up to grade 2. I mean grade 8, and then after that, back in the 50s, I guess, late 50s, the students had to go out of the Métis settlement to have a higher education. You know, so anyway, like today, the new generations, you know, they're more educated, education-wise anyway, you know, school. But the elders here, they were all farmers, trappers, and we made a good living. And they had big gardens, and like I started helping my dad farm when I was 10 years old. I was out there in the field driving 4 horses, and my dad said I was too young to sit on a plow or a disc, so I had to ride one of the old tame horses. His name was Barney. My favorite horse. Sitting on that horse, I was driving 4 horses. That's how I helped my dad work that on. That was 1946. I was a 10-year-old boy, and I grew up on a farm. And then we started raising cattle and hogs, and my dad picked me out. Well, I guess I was his favorite. Well, I had an older brother. He was about 4 or 5 years older than me, but when harvest rolled around, he'd leave. So I was the one that had to do all the butchering of the hogs and the animals, and I really enjoyed it. You know. Anyway, but yeah, today there's a big change in Paddle Prairie, and like at one time there was a lot of people had moved away, and most of them are moved back to the settlement, and we have a good school here, Northland School Division, you know, and I'm sure our younger generation are better educated. But we're still around. We'll be around for a long time yet. I just want to talk about this picture. Is my grandfather, my grandmother. This was my dad right here. He was 14 years old then, and my two uncles. So this picture's got to be well over 100 years old, because my dad was born in 1893 in High Prairie. And my grandfather, my great-grandfather, Charles Richarde, he comes from Red River Valley, Manitoba. He was French and Cree, and he came west like the young people do, and he got to St. Albert there, and he fell in love with a pretty girl named Emma Cartier, and that's where my grandfather, Charles Richarde, was born in St. Albert. But and they moved to High Prairie. That was late 1800s when they moved to High Prairie, because my dad was born in High Prairie in 1893. So I'm very proud of this picture. And my grandmother, we lost her. She passed away in 1957. She was 104 years old. But my grandfather died in 1939, and I never did see my grandfather, but I did have an opportunity to go to High Prairie in 46. I was 10 years old, and visit my grandma. Yes, definitely. I would very much like them to learn about the past, about their grandfathers and their grandmothers that had moved here in 39 and up, you know. And I would also like them to learn the Métis tradition, the trees, you know, and the roots and the land, and learn about the medicines that, you know, they should know. Because I know one thing, when I was young, when we were living in our log house, we had whooping cough, but when we moved here, I guess in 39, of course, I don't remember, there was a lot of skunks and porcupines in Paddle Prairie. And my uncle, John Felix, my dad's older brother, and we had whooping cough, and he said he's going to try the skunk scent, you know. So he did kill a skunk, and he got the scent, and he gave us you could use it, and in fact it's supposed to be good for bronchial medicine. I got asthma, and it does help me to a certain extent. But what my uncle did, he gave us a little bit in a spoon, a little bit of sugar, and that's how we were taking it, you know, the ones that were sick. And he hung a little bag outside the door of our log house, and he said this would ease the sickness that we had, you know. And I just want to say something. When we moved here the spring of 39, my little sister, she was about 5 months old, and she had the whooping cough like I did, and she passed away. And she was the first person buried in Paddle Prairie in spring of 39. But yes, I would like to see the younger generation learn all about the Métis traditions, you know, because there is a lot out there, very, very much, you know. And you go to the bush, there's medicine there. But it's just that something that I wasn't taught about that. Like we had, our doctor was Dr. Mary Jackson from Keg River Post. She was a wonderful doctor. She was the one that came up here and looked after the sick that was sick on the Metis settlement. Excuse me. I was 7 years old when I started playing guitar. This friend of my oldest sister's friend, he come to visit her in our log house, and he brought a guitar, and I looking at it, he was singing with it, and I said, oh, I want to play it. So he showed me the main three chords, the D, G, and A, you know. And he said to me, he says, young fella, he said, I'll be coming back in about a week to visit your sister. If you could play that guitar like I showed you, you could have it. So I'll tell you, my little fingers, well, I was 7 years old. My little fingers were just sore. And I did learn to play the chords, and my mom would say, Sonny, your little fingers are going to fall off. That's my mummy, eh? Well, I had this nickname, Sonny, since I was born. That's still my nickname today, Sonny. So when he came, I just couldn't wait for him to come back. When he came, he sat there with my sister, and he gave me he said, could you play it? I played it. He said, good. He said, you could have it. So that's when I started playing guitar. And I started singing. Well, my mom and dad both sang in church. They were the choir in Paddle Prairie with others. So I had my guitar. I don't know how long I had it. And then there was some fiddlers in Paddle Prairie that I finally knew how to play good. And I used to strum good. I learned myself to strum, you know, but the gentleman, he learned me how to put my fingers on the strings. So we went to a dance. I was only about 12, I guess, and this fiddler, George, his name was George Sinclair. He's one of the top fiddlers, and he's a Métis. His guitar player didn't show up, but he had the guitar and fiddle. This was a house dance. And he said, could anybody play guitar here? And my mother said, my son could. So he said, okay. So, and believe it or not, when he started playing his fiddle, I just followed him right to a T, because I used to sing already and chord for myself. And then when I was 14, I told my dad, I said, I like to play fiddle, you know. And he said, okay. He said, look in the T. Eason's catalog. So I found a fiddle. I think it was only about $12 then. So I wrote it for it, and it came in. So I started to learn. Well, I knew the tunes of the fiddle, because I already started chording for a fiddler. So I started the main chord to tune on a fiddle and the guitar is the D string. From there you got to follow it up. So we had it for about a month, I guess. I played one tune quite well. That's Paddle Prairie in the 50s. There's the government barns, government office, and this is the government store here, or this one here. But get back to my fiddle, and I started playing fiddle when I was 14, but it's only for a couple of months, and I loaned my fiddle out. The guy wanted to borrow it and never did come back, so I never played. So back in '68, I bought a second-hand fiddle at a pawn shop, and I started playing. But I did learn myself how to play. So, but I don't play that much now. My daughter and I were generally play for things around the Metis settlement. If there's some things happening, you know, we're asked to play music. And but it's mostly home entertainment, you know. Yeah, I like playing fiddle, but like now I don't play that much, you know. But it's still there, and I'm trying to get my grandkids to play, you know, and eventually they will, I guess. But if you're going to play an instrument, you have to want to play it, you know. you can't put pressure on them. Like my grandson here, I showed him the chords of a guitar, and he played it for a while, then he quit. But my daughter Dawn, she was just young when I showed her how to chord with the guitar, play guitar, and she chords to my fiddle, you know.